This in this talk, he said, "This will be our reply to violence, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, more devotedly than ever before." That's what we can do as artists. And when I think about playing, I played in orchestras, I played violin, played in orchestra with Bernstein. You felt that every single moment was done as if it's your last. He conducted with intensity. He made everything, everything was beautiful. Everything was passionate and everything was devoutly felt. There was a deep spirituality to Leonard Bernstein and also incredible conflict as a person, as a man in many aspects of his life, always dealing with conflict and how to resolve that and how to make things better and spread love. And he was all about just spreading love. So with my background with the Leonard Bernstein family, I was able to get in touch with the people that I know there and suggested that I would like to write a piece inspired by this quote. And they very quickly, thankfully, gave me the permission, granted me permission to write a piece inspired. It is not a setting of these words. I think there are pieces that where people have purchased the rights to set these words to music. And I think there's a choral piece and maybe some other things. This is a piece specifically inspired by, and that's why we include the quote on the score and that sort of thing, but it is not actually in the music itself. The only thing that is in the music, it's in the, or it is, as part of the piece, in the title that I've, for the piece, Symphony, this will be our reply. And then the three movements are intensity, beauty, and devotion. And that's the only thing from which I took actual the words. Now, for me, the idea of writing a symphony, I have to say, some friends have been after me to write a symphony. I've written literally hundreds of pieces for orchestra, and many of them have been for educational concerts, pops concerts, patriotic things. I've done a lot of concert works, piano concerto, this, violin concerto, that, all those things. But the idea of writing a symphony, for me, has always been very daunting. I think for a lot of composers. But and I don't mean this in an extremely self-deprecating way, but the idea of writing a symphony, I think you have to have a lot of ego to compel people to sit in a seat for 35 minutes, 40 minutes, or longer, listening to what you wrote. I think the idea that I would expect that what I'm going to write is worthy of your time and your commitment to being there and investment of involvement. That alone has been kind of something that stopped me for a long time. If I had a theatrical piece, I could very well. I feel like I'm writing I'm supporting a libretto that tells a story. I'm doing this that tells a story. There's a reason for that. But the idea of writing instrumental music primarily in this fashion. But when it came to the Bernstein quote and this centenary, this really gave me the impetus. I thought, okay, I really have something to express here. So how does one begin? Now I've got this intensity, beauty, and devotion. By the way, can you hear everything? Can you hear? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Good. And if I'm boring, then just yawn and I'll know.
We're spellbound.
So I always find this with a piece that when I write something, what I end up with down the line is always going to be very different from the original conception. with intensity, I thought, okay, I'm going to write. I'm going to pay tribute to Bernstein in a way. I'm going to write something that is like that takes his mambo and goes, amplifies that 100 times, where it's just 10 minutes of nonstop, intense, fast music and percussion and all this stuff. And I sat with that very thought for 8 months. And much of what I do is it stays up here, and it's a lot of thought process. Thinking, and editing before I even sit down at the piano or the computer or whatever to write. It's all a lot of cogitation and weeding out. Maybe I'll find a good idea in there. So that's what I sat with for intensity. I from the very beginning felt that the second movement would be the last thing I write. And I wanted to know how the piece would end, because I felt that the material in the last movement would inform the first and the second movement. So that's what I ended up starting with. I did not write a single note in the first movement until I had completed the third. The third movement, I knew I wanted to be a choral piece, and therefore I need text. So what text could I use to portray devotion? So a lot of research went into finding the text, and I settled very easily on a prayer from the Aleinu, the larger Aleinu, part of the High Holy Day services, and the Va'anachnu. I know from sitting in shul and standing in shul that when the congregation chants the Va'anachnu, there's a physical manifestation of what goes on. And the idea with devotion, I wanted to be able to portray a bowing gesture, that this is a bowing sort of thing. So the Va'anachnu prayer, but we bend our knees and bow down and express thanks before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. So that's the text of the Va'anachnu. And I knew that we have to go from here to there by the end of the piece. So it was going to start out a cappella, without instruments. So I sat, and I first thing I did, I set the Va'anachnu, and then I left that for a little bit, and I went to the end. What is the end? Now, there's a phrase that is batted around a lot around the world of a tikkun olam, and it comes from the Aleinu. There's this Aleinu litaken et ha'olam. We must repair the world. There actually, as far as I could find, there is not a prayer tikkun olam. And tikkun olam as a phrase has almost become an unfortunate cliche. That okay, we're gonna do good things, we're gonna build houses, we're gonna do nice things. Tikkun olam, and it's like what's the other song?
Hakuna Matata.
No, Hakuna Matata, but there's one more that you sing around the campfire, and it's Kumbaya. Yeah, I mean, Tikkun Olam has almost become like kind of the Kumbaya of the Jewish faith, but it doesn't need to be, because the utterance of it is very sincere. But there was not any text that I could find that was actually surrounding that phrase, so I wrote it. And the one thing that has benefited me, perhaps in my years of being a father and being a leader in the community, I feel everything very, very internally and very, I feel things strongly. Um, so the second I talk about our, we have to do things for our daughters, for our sons, for our, preserve what we have, um, uh, and with that in mind as our marching orders, we can begin to make progress towards repairing the world, to heal the world. So that became the essence of this. I wrote it in English, and weeded it down to a set of verses that begin with, "For the sake of our homes, for the sake of our friends, for the sake of our earth, heal the world. For the sake of our communities, for the sake of our countries, for the sake of our earth, heal the world. We must repair the world. For the sake of our mothers, fathers," and it goes daughters, sons, world. "For our knowledge, for our joy, for our love, heal the world." And then I'll come back to this. "For the sake of peace, heal the world." And then the piece ends with, "For the sake of our souls, for the sake of our future, we must repair the world, heal the world, tikkun olam." And that, then through various sources, I asked our friends at the Knoxville Chabad there. I know they're with us today. Hi, Rabbi and Miriam Esther. To help me with translation, and also somebody in Bangor, the rabbi in Bangor, was also very helpful with finding somebody to translate it and put it into Hebrew. Okay, now why Hebrew? Why is this piece all winding up to be in Hebrew? Interestingly, the symphonies of Bernstein have text, and they are both pieces. The first symphony and the third symphony have Hebrew text. It's in Hebrew. So that was partly due to that. It might sound silly, but at times English doesn't always sound sincere to me. So it feels better if it's in a different language. But the phrase itself, tikkun olam, translated, it doesn't have the same feeling. It doesn't have the same neshama. So it needed to be tikkun olam, and then to start going in and out of different languages, it just didn't make sense. So it felt right to do the entire work in Hebrew, as one of the oldest languages in civilization. So then I had the Va'anachnu at the beginning, the prayer devotion, and then the Lema'an Nishmotenu, the Tikkun Olam words at the end. How to bridge the two. How to go from the devotion to, for the sake of our families, we do this. So there was one more bridge that I needed to put together. And that text is an appeal that the chorus makes, full throttle, full voice, help us to understand, what can we do? What can we do in the face of violence? What can we do? And that's what they're screaming. Azo lanu lahavin, help us understand. Manu also, what can we do? Neged alimut, in the face of danger. Also, what can we do? So the musical gestures now, as they're, I always like to start with text, because the text gives me the rhythm that basically dictates for me the rhythm of the music. There's certain declamation. It's hard to start to write music, because if you're writing with a blank page, it's very daunting. But text has, when you utter it, it has a flow. And then when I received the translation back, I started going through these verses that I had written, and I said, Lama'an batenu, Lama'an chaverenu, Lama'an ka'adur ha'aretz. Tikkun olam. How is this going to work? How, structure wise, what is this? Um, and so, Dan, if you wouldn't mind, can you play the soprano line right there in the first time they say Laman Batenu?
Is that 2-0?
It would be
Oh,
it would be 170 175.
yep. I'm sorry, not a pianist.
That's right.
So thank you, Dan. So that last bit you hear Tikkun Olam. Though that phrase and the very beginning when you hear Laman Batenu, Laman Chaverenu, Laman Kadur Haaretz, these phrases that became a motive that will be heard a lot through the piece. And then you hear over and over in many, many different forms, Tikkun Olam. Now, as a society, very often we're not ready to hear the things that we need to hear and learn the lessons that we want to learn. So that message of Tikkun Olam, those four notes, are introduced at the very beginning of the piece in the first movement. And we as a community are not ready to hear them. We don't understand them. They sound dissonant. It sounds totally wrong. It doesn't make sense. And it's not until we've gone through the evolution of the piece that it actually fits in and we understand what those four notes mean. Just a little bit of the beginning, Dan, if you wouldn't mind playing of the third movement to get the idea of the devotional idea. I have the chorus now singing, humming. This is the Va'anachnu. They hum at first, and it has this rise and a fall. Right. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. You can play that on the cello, it would be even more beautiful.
Will.
So that Va'anachnu korim, Va'anachnu korim, that has that bowing gesture, and you'll hear that in the music as the chorus plays it and sings it, and then the orchestra plays it. So, I'll take. Are we doing okay? Are you with me?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So then I wanted to finish that because I wanted to make sure that the chorus had time to learn it. And that was the first thing that I thought I had finished. And we could send out the choral scores. And then I thought, okay, I'll tackle the first movement. So I was still sitting with this idea of intensity. I'm going to write this piece and it's going to be, and people are going to go, at the end of it, they're going, oh my gosh, oh wow. And then I realized that's totally wrong. It's absolutely the wrong thing to do. Going back to Bernstein's quote, it wasn't about the intensity. It was that in the face of bad things, we must do what we do more intensely. So then it became clear to me that I needed to portray that in the music. I needed to set up a situation in which the musicians were showing that they're playing intensely in the face of all odds. Now, how could that happen? Then I had in my ear the Mendelssohn octet. The octet is It's basically two string quartets, four violins, two violas, two celli, playing one of the most magnificent pieces ever written. Mendelssohn wrote this beautiful, beautiful piece. And as a string player, I've always loved that small ensemble feel, that communication that happens, no talking, just playing incredible music together and communicating through the music. So it became clear to me that what I needed to do was write, in essence, two first movements. The first would be a complete octet. The whole movement would be a from start to finish, an octet that people could play as a piece unto itself. And then on top of that, there would be the outside world slowly encroaching and making noise and breaking in and doing all kinds of disruptive things against which that octet needs to just plow through and say, we're not stopping. And with that, you get the intensity. So that's what you'll hear. There's a brief introduction, about half a minute, that sets up some of the harmonic language of the piece. And then we go right into this octet. And the entire string section plays the first part of it. The reason for that is that as a community, we're doing our thing. But what ends up happening is that people fraction off. And people get confused and they go their own way and they start doing other things. And they need to be reminded of true values and what is important to them. So you'll see that the orchestra departs and goes away from the octet, and the octet is left alone. And then in the height of the worst conflict, little by little, members of the string orchestra start coming back on, saying, you're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone. And then the community of the string orchestra is once again united and has the last hurrah, no matter what dissonance is surrounding it. That last note, the last triumphant D major chord, is strings alone, blasting through with intensity. The musical material that I used then so that's a cool idea, Lucas. How are you going to do that? The motives come from the music that I wrote in the third movement. So you'll hear, Dan, if you wouldn't mind playing again the soprano line, but play it down an octave, just in their regular range.
That was just where I could reach.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, I'm just teasing.
It was 175, I think.
Yeah. They're singing it for me.
Okay, now that's good. That's enough. Now, if you could go to the very, very end at measure pick up to 232, and play just that line, Alenu letaken et haolam, the soprano. Right. So you hear bum be do di do di do do. Right. Those notes, that became much of the basis of the first movement. But it became set it as a sort of a dance in 9/8, and you'll hear not too far into the first movement, that idea ba be da has become ba dee da 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 dee da dum da dee ba da 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 dee da dum da 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 dee da da dum, and it takes on a life of its own, and you don't necessarily know. Of course, you're hearing it for the first time in the first movie. You don't know what you're going to be hearing 20 minutes later in the last movie.
Can I make an aside here?
Please.
So, Lucas has been sending me the score in pieces. I won't Tad wanted to tell which piece came last and when, but so I have the.
Oh wait, you just froze. Wait, say it again. You just froze.
I've had the first and third.
Yeah.
The first and third movements, right? And I got the third movement first, but as I was reading, I thought, wow, that's cool. He's using the first movement motives in the third movement, not knowing that you had made the garment and then taken the stitches out and put it back in the first movement. So
exactly.
But that's fun. I mean, that's part of the fun of how it all comes together. Also, as an aside, we will be performing Mendelssohn Octet on our subscription series next November. So if you want
look at that! I didn't even know. That's perfect. One of the most glorious pieces ever written. I'm glad it's not in the same concert because I would pale in comparison. So you also find in this movement that gestures that the string orchestra does. They have this one thing that is like this kind of thing, which in its first iteration seems benign and just lovely and celebratory. But then what ends up happening is that the orchestra, the outside world, takes that information and mocks those people, and in fact is intrusive, so that the music that they're playing is now in reaction to these very loud ta-da, ta-da, that invade what it is that the string octet is doing. I'll mention here that I'm using some interesting percussion instruments to make some really loud noise. One of them in those moments is a brake drum, literally a brake drum from a car, where you hit it with a metal, and it's really loud. Yeah.
Cheaper than anvils.
Right? Exactly. And in the second movement also features a very a wonderful and beautiful instrument. I'll get to that in just a second. So that's basically an overview of the first movement. So you get that idea. Now, coming to the second movement, I had a completely different idea, and I thought, oh, this is going to write itself, and it's going to be really cool. And no. This whole piece has really been I pushed myself out of the box a lot in terms of what I would write, and the styles of music and the harmonic language and things like that. And I thought with beauty, how can you define beauty? Okay, it was nice, Lucas, you had this great idea: intensity, beauty, devotion. Cool. Okay, but who am I to write what is beauty? I mean, that's like, come on, who could do that? So my intent all along was to write something that set up the idea of beauty and let everybody gather the information and create their own sense of what is beauty, rather than us say I'm going to write a most gorgeous melody ever and we're going to all play it really beautifully. No. It was more, let's just create an atmosphere, and that's kind of how it evolved. And then, as I did with the first movement, I thought, okay, there's got to be a reason why things happen when you're writing. And there was one phrase in the last movement that is like none other in the entire piece. And it is the music that I wrote for the phrase, for the sake of peace. For the sake of peace, for peace, heal the world. And nothing else like this. This is at 206, Dan. Right. Thank you. Thank you. So that idea of the Lama'an ha shal, and then what ends up happening is that the voices go apart. They go up and down, and they create this cluster of sound. And it is when you just linger on it for a while, it has this numbing sort of effect to it. That idea, Lama'an ha shalom, is the basis for the entire second movement. That became the motive for the entire second movement. And what I found most interesting and fun was to negotiate not the music, but the space between the music. And there are many, many moments of silence. And how do we get into that silence? Several years ago, I wrote a percussion concerto. Some of you may remember Tim Adams played it with the Knoxville Symphony, and one of the instruments he used was a prayer bowl, a Tibetan singing bowl. It is a metal bowl, and when struck, it rings like crazy, and it's kind of like a call to worship. So the Tibetan singing bowl is featured in this as a way to it triggers the silence, and then we let it go and let it ring and ring, and then something else comes in, and it's really those moments in between that define what the beauty is.
No.
Oh, did I?
Connection lost.
Oh, wait.
Oh no, I hear you.
We're back. Hey, you're back.
Okay.
We're back. We lost you.
Okay. So anyway, the silence is what defines for me what the beauty is, and how we deal with the silence. Another thing that I just an aside that I realized, and things kind of happen. The first movement is essentially in D major. The second movement is essentially in G. The last movement is in D. So what is that? That's essentially a plagal cadence. And that was totally unintended, but that's kind of what happened.
That's an amen cadence. Yeah, that's very traditional.
Yes, Lucas, the question is, what is a plagal cadence?
Yes, thank you. Well, Dan defined it. Thank you, Dan.
Amen.
Yes. There are several things that. And to finish with the second movement, the harp is also used throughout the piece, and in a very interesting way to just pull everything down into one focal point. The last note of the second movement is not done by the entire orchestra, but in fact it's one note by the harp. And it just kind of codifies everything into that one moment before the choir then sings a cappella. There are references throughout the piece to Leonard Bernstein, some intentional and some not. Some things I kind of heard afterwards. I thought, oh gosh, how'd that get in there? There's a moment in the second movement where the trumpet, the brass are playing these chords, and the trumpet goes ba ba, and I thought, oh gosh, that's somewhere. But it's okay. It's okay. It's not. It doesn't register that way. Somewhere from West Side Story. The very opening has this massive pillar of sound that goes away suddenly, and what's left is just this conflict of quietness, and that was an intentional reference to a piece in Leonard Bernstein's Songfest. There's a beautiful song that he wrote for baritone and cello and an orchestra called "To What You Said," and he uses in this, Bernstein often played with the juxtaposition of major and minor, and that conflict, and so it's in this beautiful key, and then the C minor chord keeps on creeping in, and it just appears, and then goes on, and it's there again. And so it's this beginning of the first movement is a reference to that. Bernstein also wrote a concerto for flute and orchestra, Halil, and so there are specific moments in the piece that feature the flute. As well, if you know, and if you don't know this, I suggest go out and listen to it. Make Our Garden Grow from Candide, perhaps one of the most incredible endings to anything. It will make you cry. It is in a good way. It is so powerful. Where Candide and Cunegonde, after all their trials and tribulations, come together and say, "You've been a fool, but and so have I. But come and be my wife, and let us try before we die to make some sense of life. We're neither neither wise, nor poor, nor poor. We'll do the best we know." Sorry, the words. And make our garden grow. Make our garden grow. It's really good when you hear it, not me do it. So the ending, the big ending, choral ending. It's when you hear my piece, there's nothing melodic, but it's evocative of that ending. Of Make Our Garden Grow. And at times also you might hear a little bit of the reference of the augmented fourth that Bernstein used in West Side Story. Does anybody here know why this motive, bum-bee-dum, bum-bee-dum, was used in West Side Story, and not you, Dan? Anybody know?
I don't know.
So Bernstein originally, the show West Side Story was originally East Side Story. It was going to be a show about the conflict between the Jews and the Catholics. And much of the music he wrote as the shofar blowing. It's a shofar. Papia, papia. And that's what kept in the show when Jerry Robbins then read about, he was I think in L.A. and reading the paper about the gang wars with the Puerto Ricans in New York, and he said, "Oh, let's move the show across town," and it became West Side Story. But they kept the shofar. So you'll hear at times there is a grounded augmented fourth above a bass, but it's not. I don't do that body. You won't hear that specifically as a motive. So in a hour nutshell, or whatever it is, that's Symphony. This will be our reply. Again, I'm very, very grateful to Dan and the Oak Ridge Civic Music Association for taking the plunge on this, because when you commission a work, you do not know what it's going to be. You have no idea. And it's kind of like a prayer that it'll be something that people will like and that it's playable. I think they're still praying that that people will like it and that it's playable. But at least you know a little more about it. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
I think that for me, one of the great things is, it is a leap of faith when you participate in a commission, but that's really part of the fun. And there's a lot of call. We always try to do music by living composers, and there are people who are very popular in classical music this way or that way, and I've conducted some of Lucas's works before, and so I always make an effort to actually conduct. If I'm going to conduct a piece of music by a living composer, it should have a reason for me. Last year I did a piece by Missy Mazzoli because she's pretty well known. She's one of the kind of a contemporary young composer. But she also, there was a quote on one of her pieces from a novel by Louis Ferdinand Céline that was one of my favorite quotes ever in a 20th century piece. So I thought, oh, that's why I looked at that piece. And so having known Lucas and having conducted some of his works, there's a reason, so we all have to follow. All I'm trying to do when I'm programming music is we're trying to be authentic. There are probably pieces, Lucas, that as a conductor that you don't conduct. Maybe you're nicer than I am. But like I have, one of my friends always says, when are you going to conduct The Planets by Holst?
Oh.
And I say, we have a guest conductor.
Yeah.
Not because it's a bad piece, but because it's not
Yeah.
authentic for me yet.
I totally get that. Yeah.
So this opportunity felt incredibly authentic, and the journey for me in learning the piece and learning about Tikkun Olam, and doing research and realizing that really Tikkun Olam has like 4 iterations over several thousand years. It kind of changed its meaning a little bit, and so for me that was a great thing. But I'm always asking myself also, what can we do? And so this is something we can do. So I'm just thrilled that it's coming to fruition, and really excited to hear the first notes outside of my head and my piano playing tomorrow night in rehearsal. So any other questions from anybody? We have a question from somebody over here. Yeah.
Listening really gives a special insight into what I've seen.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
This is from a choir member who, obviously now has more insight into what's going on, and I think part of that is
I didn't hear the question.
Oh, that she just, as a choir member, she's saying now, she has a different level of investment from what you've been able to tell her.
Oh, okay, great, good.
And that gives that. But that, I think what Lucas has helped you all with a little bit is this is the process that we do as conductors. We're looking into the music and looking, for the clues or whatever. I found some clues. I learned some new clues tonight. I get some work to do tonight now. But that's kind of the process that now you're involved in, and that's awesome.
Yes, I think this story needs to be included in the notes to this piece.
There's a pretty good set of notes in the piece, but that's why people should come to the Oracle lecture tomorrow at 4:00. But the other thing I will tell you that, Lucas, I'm sure you intend this also. The music has to stand as a piece of music.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, right? Yes.
Yeah. So you're lucky. You know more about. You're the chosen ones right here. You know more about it than some, but it still has to stand on its own. One more question from Betsy over.
So it's not a question, it's an observation. I'm a first alto. He's written a long series of notes that many of us are distressed that we have to think.
The altos are distressed.
I love it.
What's new? Okay.
What?
We're supposed to scream a little bit.
Yes.
She says it's a little high. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, that's the point. That's the point. No, all I can say is it's I think that my vocal writing is better than Beethoven's Ninth. Now, I didn't say the music is better. His music is incredible, but the piece is known by choruses as being a very, very tough sing.
Yeah.
The anything that I do in a particular range, it is because I'm trying to affect that particular thing. It's not like I'm trying to suspend people in areas that they're. If it's uncomfortable, there's a reason for it. It's kind of like the bassoon at the beginning of The Rite of Spring, that it's this otherworldly sound. It's doable, and it creates a whole other thing. If the altos, if you felt comfortable in the range in that moment, then it wouldn't be the right thing.
If they make you uncomfortable, just pretend that the connection is lost.
There you go. What? I couldn't hear you. What'd you say?
Microphone?
There's another question.
Another question.
Yeah.
Lucas, I presume this was in response to the Holocaust, your work, but it couldn't be more topical and more current after the occurrence at Christchurch in New Zealand.
The work was actually not written in response to the Holocaust per se. I actually have written several pieces that reflect on the Holocaust. This, as I was writing it, I mean, every other week there was a Las Vegas, there was a, like one thing after another, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have to finish this. I've got to get it done. This is just too much. And then the Christchurch thing happened, and I immediately sent the music to the New Zealand Symphony, and say if it could be of any solace in this moment, this horrible moment, it is very much of the moment, and I'm thrilled that the piece is that Dan will be conducting with the Oak Ridge Symphony. Next month, the Bemidji Symphony in Minnesota on April 28th, and then the Los Angeles Jewish Symphony in collaboration with the Korean American Musicians Association in Los Angeles will be performing it at Disney Hall on August 17th. And since now, as it's getting out there, people are inquiring about it, and that's the whole point, to be able to get this message out and perhaps help people think that there are other ways to do things.
One more question here.
Thank you, sir. I think that artists need to have a voice in showing their displeasure with what is going on in today's society, which goes beyond the Holocaust.
Yeah, the comment is from my dear friend Fran, who says that, yeah, we all need we need this voice, and you're basically giving voice to us. And I think frequently, when terrible things happen, I remember I was in Atlanta during 9/11, and, the community turned to artists immediately for the reply, because it was the only appropriate reply. And, that's a great thing, but we need this voice. We need to keep finding our voice and using our voice. And there are all kinds of ways that we can do that. So this is a great opportunity for us, and it's unfortunately timely again.
Yes.
And again.
But I appreciate everybody who supports the Oak Ridge Symphony, and the understanding that music has powers beyond our ken as a healing force. Whenever things go wrong, for instance, in Haiti, I was involved with a big project of recording music, creating a recording to raise money through the film community for victims of the Haiti earthquake. And the thought that, when stuff like that happens, you need to restore food, water, shelter. But the thing that brings us back to any kind of sense of normalcy is when somebody starts singing a song, or you're able to turn on the radio and hear some music. That's when it's like, okay, maybe things will be okay. That's when we're expressing our higher self, and not just the things that we need as animals on this planet. So absolutely, I do pray that this message can take seed. Absolutely.
Lucas, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there. I really, American Airlines, I don't know if you fly American. I usually fly Delta. And the one time, and I did everything that I could possibly do to get there today. And now I have to apologize to the mother that's banging on the door wanting to nurse her child.
We'll let you go. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.